The group draw was just done today, and I thought I'll do a little review of it and basically give you my thoughts on who's going to make it out, what are the chances, like actually who has decent matchups regardless of the world rankings, obviously the format, all this jazz. But I thought I'd initially just mention that LS just did a review of the last patch that's going to go into Worlds, and before that he did another review of a patch, so obviously some of those nerfs and buffs remain. So if you want to get an overall sense of what the pool of champions is going to be like and what might be changing from what we saw in the summer, where it was a pretty wide open meta, but by the playoffs emerged, there was something of a distinct meta, and the teams that could play certain comps just had the advantage in the draft. So basically, a quick rundown is top lane, we're going to have champions like Cho'Gath potentially come back. Poppy, most people think won't be played, but Vizicachi's there, so maybe there'll be some conditional picks of that. There's been Kiana buffs for the jungle. The combo got slightly better, so maybe you'll see a few players play that. Please God, not Blabber. I just don't want to see that, thank you. Renekton, as usual, got some buffs, so it's going to be nice for the top lane players and also a few of the mid lane players that play the melees. Then you have Gangplank, got a slight buff. Interesting for my man Alfari, who obviously low-key is one of the best Gangplanks in the world. Kai'Sa slightly buffed, Morgana slightly buffed, so these champions should remain in the champion pool. Should expect to see potentially the LPL ADCs playing Kai'Sa. Morgana, obviously going to be interesting for someone like Hillesang, right? A classic Morgana player. In terms of nerfs, there was a Thresh nerf, which probably I think will take it a little bit out of the priority, especially because even though Aphelios got a nerf and probably will still be played, it was obviously the Thresh Aphelios is what a lot of people were going for in the draft. Jace got slightly nerfed, which probably does weaken it a little bit. I don't think you'll see as many of the carry top laners just auto go for that champion and hope they can get fed. Camille got a bit of a nerf, but I don't think that really matters. As far as I can tell, that'll be fine. Ryze got slightly nerfed, but listen, it's the utility of that champion, it's what they can do on the map. That will still be played. It just won't be the auto first pick, maybe. Varus got a nerf. Well, quite frankly, it looks like Riot just doesn't want lethality rather to be something in pro players. That probably will mean it's not played much. As I say, Aphelios got the nerf. The other ADC one's Ashe. I still think logically you pick Ashe. If you look at how it's used overall, I don't think it's the end of the world, the nerfs. So actually not that much, I think, has been forced in and out of the meta. Actually, I think the patch is going to be somewhat comfortable if you look what else is out there. So the draw was done. Obviously, technically, we don't know who will get out of the play-in yet, but you look at the teams there, it's pretty likely, like, for example, the LPL and the LCK team, I think are almost certainly going to get out. My problem is the idea that in the plains you have a Korean and a Chinese team there. That's actually just offensive, because you're treating it as though that means they're inferior to all the main event teams. Like, I hate this system in general. I think it makes a mockery of the pool and the seeding approach generally. I also think the whole nationality thing needs to be canned, where you can only have one team from that region in that group, because it just actually takes all the fucking novelty out of the play-in format. Because basically, if the top teams make it through the play-in format, they have to go into a specific group. They can't just go into any group. So actually, there's not even the whole thrill of like, oh, and who will get, like, you know, where will C9 go and what would happen if HL? Like, no, we already know, like, because of the number of teams there. Especially, how silly is it to have this format when you now invite 4 LCK and 4 LPL teams? Like, this just doesn't make sense, does it? There should be a possibility to have 2 LPL teams in one group. That shouldn't be the end of the world for my money. I don't care that people are going to go, I only want to see them play against a different... Yeah, well then fuck off then. I want to see the most competitive tournament possible. So I'll also say, basically, here's the spoiler. LNG can only be in Group D because all the other groups have a Chinese team in them from the LPL. And HLE, Hanwha Life, the Korean team from LCK, can only be in Group C because everyone else has an LCK team in. So basically, assuming C9 and Beyond Gaming don't fuck up in the group stage, in the plains, we basically know which group each of them is going to go into. And so even though it won't say it on the screen when I show you, I'll tell you as much. Now, I will say, this is a rare example of a video I do where you probably need to look at the screen a little bit, because even though I'm going to mention all the teams and the matchups, you might forget what the group is overall. So I'm going to show you the group each time. So first of all, obviously we need to look at the plains, right, to find out who's going to be joining the teams in the main event. Spoiler, I don't think there's that much actual variety in this regard. First of all, I think this group draw is something of a fucking joke, because as usual, they even used a pool system to draw this, and in the pool system, they acted, with the way the pool system works, as though Beyond, the number 2 team from PCS, and Cloud9, the number 3 seed from LCS, are equal to LNG and Hanwha Life. And as a result, Hanwha Life and LNG, by the way, LNG, a team that can be a playoff team, Hanwha Life, probably on the border of maybe being a playoff team. They're both in the same fucking playing group. This is actually just stupid. So, okay, whatever. By the way, remember, there's a world where LNG, if the LPL playoffs got different, would be fucking top esports. So we would just have, like, Knight and Chovy and Deft just all playing against each other in a fucking Worlds playing. Like, Riot's never going to get it. They're going to literally sacrifice like 20 worlds for some imaginary dream where like minor regions are as good as their best LEC teams and fucking like LCS is as good as LCK. Like they're going to actually sacrifice basically what makes CSGO majors and Dota 2 International brilliant, which is how you get nearly all the best teams and you have a really sturdy format. They're going to sacrifice all that as usual for some sort of bullshit United Colours of Benetton commercial that they're always trying to fucking push. Why do they have to gaslight you as to what the reality of their own competitive game is, for fuck's sake? So I'll just say, just because Hanwha Life and LNG are there, it makes Group A somewhat stacked. Group B, there's a lot more parity there, but even so, as much as Detonation Focus Me probably impressed people at MSI, obviously unicorns are love. There's always like, listen, there's a lot of skill in pro play in Russian esports in my opinion, so there's a world where they score. Cheeky little upset, obviously Beyond, who almost beat the PCS winners, PSG. Remember, Beyond has Doggo. That was the guy who was playing as a stand-in for, what's his name, Unified or whatever, at the MSI. And actually was fucking carrying a whole bunch of games at ADC. So here's the thing. Group B is actually dangerous for Cloud9. It doesn't have a favourite, so they should get out, and then they should, in the playoffs, still be able to maybe do something. But I will say, the rough thing is, if you're Cloud9, you want to fucking win this group, because you want to avoid LNG and Hanwha Life, right? So I think overall, Cloud9, in theory, should be getting out of this group. I also think, logically, Beyond should as well, when you look at the quality of the players. But there's certainly chances to get upset here, especially because you don't play this competition very often. And I think it will be a big stain on Cloud9 if they don't get out of this group, especially if they don't get out of the play-ins overall. So if we go to Group A of the main event, you've got, like, first and foremost, actually let's just talk overall. I hate the way people are acting like this was past Worlds, and so they're all just talking like, oh, this group's great, what the fuck is this group? This group's unfair. It's like, guys, there are 4 LPL and 4 LCK teams this time. So in theory, no group should be a lock for a Western team to get out of. You can't get the lucky group of like TSM at Season 4 Worlds. Similarly, there should be no easy bracket draws. You should get an Asian team no matter where you fucking come in the group because of how many there are in the tournament. Now, obviously, everyone always goes with like, it's a group of death. Group of death, in theory, means there's like 3 teams that should go pretty deep in the tournament or be like tournament favourites, and the only 2 can get out, but they're all 3 in one group. That ain't the case here. None of these groups are like that. Like in Group A, you'd have to think Rogue was like a tournament favourite or go to the semis. Like this, there are no groups of death in this one. Like yes, we've got for tournament favourites, but there's only 2 of them, so they should just get out. I'll just say this. Yes, there is maybe a world where if you forget everything in the playoffs from Rogue and just remember how good they are at best of ones, maybe you could say this is the group of death, especially when you know that Cloud9 is probably going to be the 4th team. Okay, they were the champions of spring. Rogue could have been the champions of spring. On that tenuous basis, it's a group of death. But it's not like some clear-cut one overall. So, for me, as usual, the pool system is fucking garbage. Like, PCS team gets, in PSG Talent in this case, gets to be a pool 1 seed, which means they're not only treated identically to EDG and Damwon Gaming, but they're treated as better than RNG, T1. Fuck off, Riot. I don't care how many times you do this, it's never going to make sense. Similarly, you go and look, in Pool 2, you have 100 Thieves, but Pool 3 has fucking RNG and T1. Who here thinks 100 Thieves is better than RNG? Anyone? Bueller, even T1, like, give me a break. They were in the fucking final of LCK no matter what problems they had. Then, Rogue gets the Pool 3 spot because of VCS issues, so whatever, that's just a whatever. So let's look at the group. In Group A, you have Damwon Gaming, that's the Pool 1 team. You have FPX, that's the Pool 2 team. You have Rogue, that's the Pool 3 team. And as I said, if Cloud9 make it out, in theory, Cloud9, based on the nationalities and the regions, they will be the 4th team. Now, obviously, name value, that looks crazy, right? Like I said, it could be like, in theory, all these teams could have been champions this year. Actually, interestingly enough, only Damwon were champions and Cloud9, assuming they get out into this scenario. FPX obviously never won anything and Rogue never won anything either. Now, the interesting thing for me here is, let's start with Damwon. They're basically a favourite for the whole tournament. I think, actually, because EDG beat FPX, there's even a world where I don't hate it if someone thinks Damwon's the #1 team overall. My problem is I thought Korea was very weak outside of Damwon, especially in playoff settings, and so they did sort of fuck around a bit, but they still do have very strong players, and I think overall Benham were not probably going to be in a bot lane meta. I think they are a real favourite for this tournament overall. I do think, actually, interestingly enough, that like Rogue, for example, they can have best of ones where they can lane against Damwon. The issue is, if we get to team fights, I don't think Rogue's going to have the leads overall that they're going to be able to overcome the fact that Damwon will just tear their arseholes up in team fights. So that's sort of an issue. I'd also trust Showmaker in a team fight a lot more than Larson right now. I do think, though, interestingly enough, top lane is where I'm interested for Damwon to maybe have some trouble. Because Khan, skill-wise, is a very good player. He's one of the greatest Korean players ever. The problem is, he is a classic international choker/underperformer. So even though in this team he's played well, he's certainly been one of the best tops in LCK, pretty weak role by the way, I actually think he's primed to potentially get exposed and have a few best of ones where he looks dodgy. Think about it, he's playing Nagori, better player in my opinion, and who knows this team inside out. Odoan there, who I actually think can be the sleeper OP in this group. Aside from Nagori, he can go head-to-head with any of these fucking guys. And then Fudge, who's actually overperformed somewhat in a bunch of settings like MSI. So there's not even a world where Fudge does fine and sort of embarrasses him once or twice in lane. So I think actually Khan's the position where I'm looking potentially that people can attack, especially with how strong some of the top lane champions are. And I think Odoam there can potentially make it interesting for Rogue at least. And I think the Gory should probably style on this group. Now, mid lane is very interesting because for name value, forget form for a moment, you've got Showmaker, Doinby, Larson and Perks. Now, these are players who are like in their regions MVP candidates if they're in their peak form. So mid lane, in theory, is fantastic. Not only that, look at the different styles. You've got like the mad playmaking of Showmaker. You've got Doinby's mental champion pool and move around the map style, and his laning improved a lot. You've got Larson, who in theory is going to get his CS all the time. Admittedly, he hasn't been that good in the team fights necessarily, does disappear in playoffs. And then you've got Perks, the ultimate clutch Westerner, the guy who actually pretty much always performs internationally. So I think actually there's no slouches really in mid lane here. And again, people like Showmaker don't necessarily have the crazy advantage they would in a different group. Now, after down one, you've got FPX, right? Now, the idea of FPX is a pool 2 team. I get it that they didn't win their region, but you should also see not just only off that in my opinion, but whatever. I do think though that for a pool 2 team, they're totally fine. But a lot of people still think spiritually that FPX is the best team in the world, that they should have won LPL and they're going to be #1. If they'd have won LPL, by the way, everyone would be saying they're locked to win Worlds. As a result, I actually think they're the most overrated Asian team to ever go to Worlds because they've managed to get this status mentally of they're the #1 team or the real #1 team, but they've never won anything this year. They lost both the LPLs. They never won a split. In fact, Doinby in his career, people have now overrated this guy. Not individually, because he's got a lot better individually, but his career's mad overrated. Like, he's won 1 LPL ever. He's been in position to win, like, a number. And he's won 1 Worlds. Okay, that's pretty good. But you have to remember, there's motherfuckers like Scout have won, like, 3 LPLs. There's people who've won Worlds already previously. Like, I think, actually, FPX is getting a tiny bit overrated. Even though they, of course, may indeed go on to win Worlds. They probably are #2 and #3 seed in the tournament if you do it just by pure strength. So they have the pieces to win Worlds. I think the key personally is it's not an ADC meta. Now, I come and I go on that because on the one hand, if the ADC champions are strong, like some of them are, that actually helps LWX. But I think he is a mega overrated player. And so for my money, let's hope it just stays with top. Let's hope, and remember, Doinby has some interesting flexes. I think basically the meta's probably going to be pretty good for them. I think they will fuck up Rogue and Cloud9, but I think there's certainly a world where Damwon beats them. I'm stylistically very interested to see that because it means right in the group stage we'll see, are Damwon stuck in like a Korean meta or can they play and go head to head with everyone out there? And also, Canyon can obviously go head to head with Tian. That's certainly a factor to consider. Rogue is your pool 3 team. People are actually going overboard with Rogue now. They didn't trip over and win all those best of ones this year, you know. They didn't almost win Spring and just like accidentally. Yes, they were shit in the playoffs of summer. Yes, something went wrong. But you're supposed to look at the fundamentals of the team. They've also had all these weeks now. They're going to have this whole boot camp against Asian teams. So it's not like they're going to go into Worlds like they did the summer playoffs, and think we're just styling on everyone in scrims. No, that won't have happened. And so if they're going to get cracked, they'll get cracked in the actual boot camp. So I've got to say this. One, I'm glad they've got 2 of the tournament favourites, because it means for them to get out the group, they're actually going to have to show me they're really good. But here's the good news, guys. I actually don't think they'll get out of the group, but I think they're a dark horse. I think people writing them off completely are silly. In my opinion, I actually think here's the cool thing. Laning-wise, if they play to their strengths, the champions are there. There's a world where they can lane even or ahead, potentially even against FPX and Damwon. I don't care what anyone says. But the problem, I think, is this. Their wildcard playing team being Cloud9, that's actually a nightmare for them, in my opinion. Because, look, it's better than obviously if you've got another Asian team. But if you look at it overall, they'd much rather have, like, Beyond Gaming. Because this is a world where if Cloud9 can just hang around in the game with them, Cloud9 actually has something of a clutch factor to them. They can be like Mad Lions light and potentially cause problems for Rogue. So I think there's a world where Rogue does get an upset off Damwon or FPX. Of the two, I'd probably pick Damwon just because of like the classic Korean style and just playing a bit more conservative, maybe not as going to be as chaotic and punish. But I do think that FPX will probably smash them. And I think the interesting thing for me is, if you're Rogue, you must 2-0 Cloud9 if you want to have a shot at some sort of a tiebreaker. Cloud9 is probably going to be the 4th team. Right, let's be real. They can win some best of ones. 1 or 2. I don't think Perks is going to be scared. I don't think Sven's going to be scared. The main issue, obviously, is what's Blabber going to do. If he can have a few pop-off games, interesting enough right there. I will say in this group, you've got motherfuckers who just play shit like Volley Bear and stuff like that. There's going to be picks that... I don't think he's ever faced that, like a real one of those, if you look at the people he plays in LCS. I do think people overall have gone way too far with this group, going like, it's just a done deal, it can only be Jam1 and FPX. No, like listen, yes, it has the top 2 teams for many people, I get that. But Rogue and Cloud9, I think they're primed to cause the odd upset. So the main issue for me is, can either of them 2-0 each other and therefore make that actually count for something? If you look at the roles, in theory, I think mid lane's probably the best role in the group. Remember, FPX, this Pool 2 team, that could have been Mad Lions, that could have been PSG talent. In a world where it's PSG talent, suddenly Rogue might actually be able to get out the group. Right now, it's if they get Hanwha Life as their like all of a sudden, like they could have been out the group. Obviously, this is in theory one of the hardest groups they could have gotten, but when you consider how they've shit the bed in the playoffs, I don't want to see them in the playoffs unless they can do some big boy shit in the best of ones. Then we go to Group B. Now, Group B, Pool's 1 seed is EDG. EDG was really good at the beginning of summer. They sort of like lapsed a bit towards the end and lost. But then again, a lot of LPL teams do that when they're near the top of the rankings. They turned it on big time in the playoffs. They managed to win and shock everyone over FPX. In theory, the best team in the world. I don't think they're actually getting their due, because the problem is, outside of their bot lane, they don't have sexy names. Like, listen, Mako and Viper... I mean, Mako was one of the best supports to ever play League of Legends, and Viper has been one of the best AD carries this year, and then if you go back a couple of years when he was in Griffin, certainly very good. But here's the thing, you look at their team overall, this team could do all sorts in team fights for my money. I think they've even got a really nice group, like, they can top this group. There aren't really that many danger points, and here's an interesting storyline for you. Obviously, Scout used to be Faker's backup and was sort of used in scrims and then sold off to China. Here's the thing, Scout went and won a whole bunch of LPLs and went to Worlds, etc. since then. So this is actually the first time for my money Scout can go head-to-head with Faker and be a better player than him right now. I think that will be a massive deal for the Koreans. It'll crack some of this image that Faker has as this like, oh, he can always return to godlike form at Worlds. He hasn't really done that the last few Worlds overall. Then obviously you've got T1 as a Pool 3 team. Right, listen, they're a little bit overrated outside of being a Pool 3 team in the sense that they're T1, they have Faker. Like, that alone makes people go, oh my god. Like, Faker is nowhere near the best mid player. I don't think he's even the best mid player in this group. He's nowhere near the best player in the world. Like, those days have just gone. Like, we haven't seen that Faker for a long time now, even when they won LCK. So, he is massively experienced still. He can still be a clutch factor. But I do think his champion pool's a bit whack this split. I thought this year they never got the lineup around him properly. He had some very good games when he played Rise. The problem is, in theory, that's been slightly nerfed. I just don't think actually overall that T1's as dangerous in this group as people think. They're not the lock to come top 2. They're not a lock to win the group. I think, interestingly, what they do with the ADC position is what I want to know, because I still think Teddy's very good and probably fits their style better. Gumayashi obviously has mad mechanics, and people think, oh, the youth and the potential, like, and can be a pop-off player. also can go too far though. So depends. Do they want to play conservative? Do they want to just tear it up and let the boys go? I'm actually kind of leaning to the Teddy side, but I could see a world in which both happen. I still think Kerry is a very good support player. Still think he can do a lot. I think in this group, actually, he's the best support player in the group, realistically. It's between him and Mako, but listen, I still think he's a very good player. I'll finally say, I actually don't really have any issues with the teams in this group for T1. Like, I think they can certainly play against everyone. Remember, for the last position, it's probably going to be Beyond Gaming. So if you're T1, it's actually not a terrible group. The issue just is, 100 Thieves probably actually primed to upset you, potentially, in a way that in past years would have been impossible. So 100 Thieves is the Pool 2 team. Notice I put T1 above as the Pool 3 team, because I think it's slightly better than 100 Thieves overall. I think they can steal a game off T1. I think there can be a big game where Aberdaga gets his champions, where Closer pops off a little bit. I don't think that's unreasonable at all. I think they've actually, by the way, got... Unfortunately, considering I think the actual best player on 100 Thieves is their AD carry, FBI, I do think they've got a hard group in that sense. I think he's going to be going against pretty good... basically, some of the best players on the other teams are the ADC. I do think that evens it up a bit. Anders Aphelios, in theory, got a little bit nerfed, which he was sort of first picking and he was very good on. So that does reduce their chances a little bit. Obviously, the main issue goes, maybe they can steal a game off Beyond. They can beat T1. They can beat Beyond, but it's not guaranteed. And the main issue is, will their macro be tested? Can they just get ahead early and win a bunch of skirmishes and team fights? If they can, they've got an outside chance to get out of this group. Then you've got Beyond Gaming, which is going to be the fourth team. Now, listen, people are going to think, who cares about the XLMS/PCS? They're always shit. Actually, they tend to slightly overperform, so they don't always necessarily get out the groups. I would say this. You look at this team, they beat PSG in a 5-game series in the upper bracket, from what I remember. And then the final, it was a 5-game series, and they lost to PSG. The key thing is, in the final... Doggo basically just couldn't sort of get in the game, and he is the best player on this team. He was the guy that was on PSG as the stand-in at ADC at MSI and really impressed a lot of people. He is potentially a star player. Like I say, unfortunately, again, this is a group full of ADCs, so we'll really see how strong he is. There's the whole Taiwan, Korea killer factor that they used to have with Flash Wolves. That'll certainly be very interesting in regard that T1's actually somewhat weaker than other years. So if I'm the players here, it's like, let's go for it. Let's continue the tradition. One last thing to say. Beyond, in theory, isn't going to be as good because unfortunately they can't take their top laner. But then they've got Vizicachi, who wanted to come back anyway and has been playing a bit, the European player. He's going to come right at a time when Cho'Gath and Poppy in theory are buffed. So there's some weird pocket pick shit that Vizicachi could bring out, and maybe that can lead to a miracle best-of-1 win. I doubt they get out of the group though, let's be real. This is another mid lane group because you've got Scout, Faker, Aberdaga, and... I mean, it depends really whether you give a fuck who the guy from Beyond Gaming is, right? So, even so, you got to give respect. I think if you look at it, 100 Thieves could have been Fnatic, so I actually think this could, in theory, have been a stronger group overall. My question is just this. Who can 2-0 Beyond Gaming? If everyone can, then it's just down to those one best-of-1 upsets that cause a tiebreaker or get you out the group, right? Now, in Group C... RNG, who actually is a Pool 3 team, because what a fucking joke the system that Riot uses is. We have Fnatic, who's a Pool 2 team, and then we have Hanwha Life Esports is probably going to get the playing spot. So, believe it or not, even though they're a playing team, they're probably actually the third best team in this group, or second best. And then you have PSG, Talon, the number one the Pool 1 team, who probably on paper is actually, for my money, the worst team in this group. I know people are going to put Hanwha Life doesn't play against the fucking PCS, does it? So let's talk about this. RNG is missing Tabe, their coach, but they had issues themselves at MSI from what I remember. I don't think that's the end of the world. I look at the teams they're playing. I think realistically, they don't need to have some god tier coach. I think they can even do it remotely, but it does make them slightly weaker potentially. I think spiritually, they probably are slightly better than EDG. Not from playoff performance. You just look at who their players are, their style, the tenure of certain players in the team. I do think jungle's a bit of an issue. I think, obviously, you're going to see the top lane style. I mean, the champions are still there by Xiaohu. Ming is going to be a massive factor as a captain. I think they've got strengths here, in this group particularly, that are pretty interesting. I can see them potentially, though, having some shaky mid lane games. I actually do think that their mid lane is a little bit whack, and he's going in a group with Chovy, best laner in the group and easily. Maple, who always, if anything, overperforms internationally and has prevailed against Koreans very well in his career. And then Niski, listen, if Niski's on paper the worst one in the middle, give me a break. Like, Niski can go head-to-head with the RNG mid laner, especially because he actually, under pressure, has been somewhat pretty good generally. Interestingly, RNG will have the best top laner, which is a big deal by their style, so they are still the favourite. I think when they play Fnatic, it can be a pretty messy game. I like Fnatic's go button in that sense, but RNG is still the better team overall, but let's see if they can lose one best to one. Fnatic I have as the second best team, slightly. I think they overperformed in the playoffs. There were still tons of fifth games, so they could have played almost anywhere in the playoffs. But like I say, the go button is legit. They actually seem to believe in whatever the concept is. I have my concerns about Bwipo as a rookie jungler and Adam as a pure rookie with one split going to Worlds. But I look at this group and I think, listen, actually, if you had to look who you're playing against, I don't think you've got the worst group in that regard. I think you've actually got players where they're going to give you chances. They're going to give you some breathing room. I do think Niski isn't overall good enough for the world's best, but I think this group, listen, he can hang with them. He can hang. That's the key thing. The best news for Fnatic is the bot lane is really good. Like, it's great for this group, in my opinion. It gives them very good chances against a bunch of teams. And you want to see how good Upset is? Let's have Upset against Deft. That's an interesting one, right? If anything, Upset's got the better bot lane probably there. Hillestad can probably style on most of the shit in this group, quite frankly. Hanwha Life Esports, I'm putting as the third best team. They have Chovy and Deft. I don't care what the rest of the players are like. They're going to play a boot camp too. Chovy and Deft alone can win you enough best of ones to at least get to a tiebreaker scenario here and make it interesting. So I think they're an interesting dark horse to get out of the group. I actually have the pool one team, PSG, as the worst team. Right, listen, don't overreact that they don't have the doggo guy who's standing for MSI because, as I alluded to before, Unified, their AD carry who couldn't go, is one of the stars of the PCS. Both in spring and in summer, he's one of the best players, arguably the best player on this team. So actually, if anything, they might be stronger without Doggo. They were the number one seed, who probably isn't making it out of this group though, which is a big deal. It shows how bad the pool season system is. But with that said, they did go 18-0 in PCS. They did win PCS. Taiwan is pretty much always underrated. I'll throw that out there. And some Hong Kong players, I think. I think this group actually sees a lot of upsets. Like, I could see a world where Fnatic beats RNG, who beats Hanwha Life, who beats Fnatic in a game, just Chovy goes monster, Deft does fine in bot lane, but then maybe Fnatic even loses a game to PSG or something. Maybe that can happen as a one-off. Not impossible. In theory, the best role in this group is also mid. It's basically the storyline of all the groups. I've noticed a lot of the other roles, they're just a bit up and down, and some of the best players in the world didn't qualify. So you just end up with a lot of good mid laners, basically. Remember that Fnatic could have been 100 Thieves, which makes us actually like a pretty easy group if you're RNG. Could have been Gen.G, which makes it maybe a tougher group. Debatable on that one overall. Notice a lot of people are kind of out on Gen.G, but I think compared to teams like Fnatic, they're certainly still very good. Group D is going to be Mad Lions Pool 1 team. It's going to be Gen.G Pool 2. Assuming LNG get out of the planes, I'm going to have them as the third best team. Team Liquid probably is the worst team in the group, but they're a Pool 3 team. That's something that's certainly possible. Right, first things first, Mad Lions. They've got all the grit. They've got the comeback potential. Humanoids, a pretty good player. Kai'Sa is a monster player. Elyoya's been the revelation of the LEC. With all that said, you look at their strongest players. On paper, it's Humanoid and Kai'Sa. Humanoid's got a tough group. He's got BDD, who, listen, I've always thought had troubles being the true, like, world best mid laner, but he's always a good player. They've got Faker. Yes, he's a bit washed up, but it's still Faker, and there's still a few champions he can play. And then you've got Icon, who Westerners probably aren't going to know at all, but he is a very strong player, and he could, in theory, be the best mid laner in this group. So, Humanoid's got a tough group. I actually think Kai'Sa, overall, though, can be a big difference maker for Mad Lions. Yes, Core JJ's out there, but aside from that, I actually think Kai'Sa has make a claim he's the best support player in this group. So you look at what he did in Europe, he could really make them win a lot of games here. I think the interesting thing is, this is a very dangerous group for Mad Lions. They could come first, they could beat every team in the group. They could also, in my opinion, lose to every team in the group. I think that's actually possible. So as a result, I think this is the group that's wide open for my money. Gen.G, as I alluded to, they're always underestimated by Westerners. People act like they're just trash because they're boring. What they do, they are good at, and they're pretty stable. Like, Mad Lions probably is the best LEC team to fuck with them, But it's Team Liquid? No, I think actually, if anything, they're going to be good against Team Liquid. So I think they've still got some strong players. I think Ruler's the best AD carry in the group. Gen.G certainly has their chances to not only win the group, but I think they actually, just from consistency, probably should get out top 2. They should be going to the playoffs. LNG, here's the interesting thing. They have Tarzan, one of my favourite junglers ever, and he is for real. He might be the best jungler in this whole tournament, maybe even in the world. Icon, as I said, will be underestimated by Westerners because they just don't know his game. He is a strong player. He plays the whole gamut. He plays Ryze, LeBlanc, Silas, fucking Syndra, Lucian. Like, this guy will play whatever is strong, and you can guarantee he'll make a difference. So for me, it's the matchup against Gen.G that I want to see for LNG because of the jungle mid. Like, in theory, on paper, the players from LNG are better. But then again, it's a Korean and a Chinese player. How does that work out against a classic Clid BDD? I want to see how that works out. I think people are probably underestimating Gen.G. Now, I've put Team Liquid as my worst team here because I think they're going to be underestimated because how dog shit they were in the final. I thought they got mind gamed. Looked like from practice they didn't know what the fuck they were doing. They had a few individual performances that were a bit bad. My boy Jensen didn't really fucking do anything, did he? Santorin sort of disappeared. The thing is this. Look at who they have just on paper in Team Liquid. Alphari and CoreJJ are contenders for best player in their role in the group. So if you're on the worst team but you have two of the best players in the group, you've got chances. Now, I actually think overall there aren't really elite top laners in this particular group. So I think personally Alphari can be the MVP of the group and can give Team Liquid that chance to sneak out in second place. I have my concerns about Santorin under pressure. I don't really worry about Jensen though. He seems to always get it together for Worlds. In theory, the best role, even in this group, is mid lane. You've obviously got BDD, Humanoid, Jensen, and then Icon. Like, it's a pretty fucking good role, right? Remember, Gen.G could have been 100 Thieves, though. Obviously, Team Liquid then wouldn't be in the group, but there's a world where it would be Mad Lions, 100 Thieves, and then, I don't know, fucking T1, and Beyond Games, something like. There's a world where actually Mad Lions could have got an even easier group. Mid lane generally is the best in practically every group. I think top lane is pretty good in Group A, though, the one that had Nagori, etc., and Khan. Chances for Western teams to get out. Right, Group A, I think not that high, but also not impossible, like people are saying. Group B, I think actually there's a good chance that 100 Thieves can get out of this group. I think Group C, there's a good chance for that can get out of this group. Probably second place, but they can get out of this group. I think Group D, I'd say here's the thing. Team Liquid has the hardest time, aside from Rogue, of any Western team to get out of the group. But the thing is, it's actually not impossible in this group. The key thing is, I've got to have monster performances from Alphari and CoreJJ. But if that happens, they can fight for that second spot. And I think people are actually writing them off. Damn1 and FPX being in the same group is actually a good thing. Because it means, if you know how the bracket system works, the two teams who get out the same group can't be on the same side. It means we can have a Damn1 versus FPX, LPL versus LCK, potentially number 1, number 2 teams in the world, play in the final. Which, when you know how dog shit the bracket format is, I like that to happen. So the final could maybe be amazing. Only Damn1 of Korea, for my money, actually wins their group. So I think this is going to be another example of how strong the LPL is, because I think at least 2 LPL teams win their group, which is going to be the most of any region. LNG, quite frankly, getting a better group coming from the plains than Rogue, who were a 3rd seed, seems like it doesn't make any fucking sense, as usual with this format. I think Mad Lions can actually win Group D. When's the last time fucking Western team won a group, right? You probably have to go back to like H2K in Season 6. With Mad Lions win Group D, there is a world where we can have a West versus West quarter-final, which has never happened from memory. So, I mean, obviously, beyond like Season fucking 3 Worlds, I'm talking about the real Worlds with the best of 5s in the normal format. Now, you had Cloud9 versus Fnatic at Season 8 Worlds, but that was in the semis, and that only happened because Cloud9 pulled off a big upset over Korean team Afrika Freaks. So, imagine if this was Mad Lions versus 100 Thieves. Imagine the hype for a best of 5 there. That'd be pretty fucking fun, right? Who wouldn't want to see that one? That would actually be some legit trash talk, and it wouldn't just be like a G2 versus, oh, but they're going to smash this team like they do with his TL, right? You can also get Damn1 versus RNG, potentially in the quarterfinals. That in itself could be a World's Finals. Sure, RNG didn't show the same form in summer, but that is the champion, or in fact, it's a rematch of the MSI, and obviously that's the champion of Korea overall, and then LPL in the spring. So I think there's some pretty good ones overall in there. I think actually this is looking to be a pretty tasty Worlds. Speaking of tasty, what about, do you enjoy drinks? Well, if you do, then how about Gamer subs. Yeah, that's right. We're talking about gamer subs, baby. What if we just take this shit off and say 10% off with the code Thorin at gamersubs.gg, TOITHORIN. Now, one of the flavours I've been enjoying recently is one of the new ones, pineapple cocktail. Oh no, pineapple on stuff. Yeah, pineapples are delicious. What are you talking about? Get the island vibes, motherfucker.
Hey, this is Smithy and you're watching Thorin's YouTube channel.
This video was kindly supported by Kris with a K, Lager15, Matt Pugnatio, Rajcula, Skaparen, Travis Goff, Zack Schmidt, Adam Ochs, Alexander Rao, Animosity, Butt Pounder 420, Kris, ErikHillestad, Hades, Jdubs, Jensen Goh, John Shelton, Joseph Ginsburg, Kovacevicd, Tobias Bernasconi, Zoomba, Zyrathenia, and special thanks go out to both Jerky's Minion and DZL. Do you want to suggest a topic or a guest for some of my content? Want to ask me a question in one of those video AMAs? Do you want teasers? Who's going to be the guests on my next interviews? Do you want to take part in a lengthy esports discussion with me? Well, put your money where your mouth is. Join the Skilluminati today at the Patreon link in the description box below.